Hey Reddit. I never thought I'd be here, but I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I need some outside perspective. My wife, Emily, and I have been together for 12 years, married for 7. We met in college. She was this ambitious, vibrant force of nature, always dreaming big. She's a restaurant manager now, with aspirations of running her own place someday. I couldn't be prouder, or at least, I couldn't until recently. Things have felt off between us. It's hard to put into words, but I think it started about 6 months ago. Emily's job has always been demanding, long hours, late nights, and networking events, but recently, she's been pulling full days and still coming home late. When I ask about it, she brushes it off, saying it's part of building connections. I've always trusted her, but lately, her explanations feel hollow. One night, we were watching TV, and her phone buzzed. She laughed at the message and quickly turned the screen away before I could glance over. It could have been harmless, right? But when I asked, she said, "Just a work thing." And the way she said it felt rehearsed. She's been glued to her phone more often, smiling, typing, but never really engaging with me anymore. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm paranoid. But the other night, she came home late, reeking of expensive cologne I don't wear. She claimed it was from a client's handshake. I didn't say anything, but I could feel this knot forming in my gut. Am I imagining things? Overthinking? Or is there something here? Alright, so things escalated after my last post. I decided to keep my suspicions to myself and observe. I wasn't going to jump to conclusions without solid proof. But man, it's hard to stay rational when your gut keeps screaming that something isn't right. Emily's behavior didn't change much, except now, she seemed distracted. We'd be talking, and I'd catch her zoning out or checking her phone like she was waiting for something, or someone. Then came the day I found a receipt in her jacket pocket. It was from a swanky cocktail bar downtown, dated the previous Thursday. She told me she was working late that night. When I casually brought it up over dinner, she didn't even flinch. "Oh yeah," she said. "I had to meet with a supplier after work. It ran late, so we grabbed a drink." Her explanation was smooth, too smooth. But what could I say? "I don't believe you." That'd only make me look insecure. I let it slide, but the knot in my gut tightened. Then, something weird happened. Emily's car started showing up on my phone's GPS as being at this boutique hotel downtown. I only noticed because we share a family locator app for emergencies. The first time, I thought it was a glitch. The second time, I asked her about it casually. She blinked then laughed. "Oh, that's so weird. We've been meeting clients at their restaurants, and I guess it pinged wrong." She waved it off, saying GPS always acts up in the city. Again, her answer seemed logical on the surface, but my instincts weren't buying it. I decided to run a little test. On a day I knew she'd be working late, I drove by that hotel after work. Sure enough, her car was parked out front. I waited for 30 minutes, feeling like a creep and an idiot, but she didn't come out. Eventually, I left, convincing myself that maybe it was just a coincidence. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I was convinced something shady was going on. But just as I was preparing to dig deeper, Emily came home one night practically glowing. "I got it," she announced, holding up a bottle of champagne like a trophy. I stared at her, confused. "The regional manager position," she clarified, beaming. "I got the promotion." Now, here's the thing, Emily's been working toward this role for years. It's a huge deal, more responsibility, a bigger paycheck, and a massive stepping stone toward owning her own restaurant someday. She looked so happy, and for a second, I felt like a jerk for doubting her. Maybe all those late nights and meetings really were about work after all. We celebrated that night, and for the first time in weeks, everything felt normal. She laughed, we joked around, and it was like the old Emily was back. I wanted to believe this was the start of things getting better. But then, the crazy part happened. The next morning, I was scrolling through my news feed when I saw an article about Emily's company. The headline? "Shake up at Company name, 2 executives resign amid scandal. My stomach dropped. The article mentioned vague allegations of misconduct involving company leadership, but it didn't name names. What caught my attention was the timing. The resignations happened the same week Emily got her promotion. I showed her the article over breakfast, trying to gauge her reaction. She glanced at it, shrugged, and said, "Yeah, I heard something about that. Probably why they pushed my promotion through so fast." Her tone was casual, but her eyes darted away quickly, too quickly. This is where things start to feel like a bad movie. A few days after Emily's promotion, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line? "You deserve to know." At first, I thought it was spam. But when I opened it, my heart started racing. The email contained a single line of text. "Your wife's promotion wasn't earned, and you should ask her about her meetings at the Palomar Hotel." Attached was a blurry photo of Emily sitting at a hotel bar with a man in a suit. It was hard to tell who he was, but the way he leaned in close to her gave me a sinking feeling. Now, I'm not the type to jump to conclusions, but between the GPS pings, the bar receipts, and now this, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was racing. Who sent this? Was it someone from her work? A jilted coworker jealous of her promotion? Or worse, was it real? That night, I tried to bring it up without sounding accusatory. "Hey, Em," I said casually while we were watching TV. "What's going on with those resignations at work? Seems like a big deal." She tensed for a split second before answering. "Not really my department. Honestly, I think it's just corporate politics." She didn't even look at me when she said it. I thought about pushing further, maybe mentioning the email or the photo, but something held me back. If I showed my cards too early, she'd know I was suspicious. I decided to wait and see if anything else came to light. Little did I know, the universe wasn't done with me yet. Things got weirder after the email. Emily was acting normal, or at least trying to. But once you notice cracks, you can't stop seeing them. She started leaving the house earlier in the morning, coming home even later claiming she was adjusting to the new responsibilities. I wanted to believe her, but that picture from the email haunted me. Then, one night, something happened that made my skin crawl. Around 11:30 p.m., Emily's phone rang. I was half asleep but jolted awake when I heard her muffled voice in the hallway. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when someone's whispering that late at night, it's hard not to. I heard snippets. "No, not tonight. I can't talk here." "Yes, I know, but it's risky." The moment I walked into the hallway, she froze. Her phone was pressed to her ear, her face pale. "Work call," she said quickly, covering the mouthpiece. "Sorry, I didn't want to wake you." "Work call? At midnight?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's a crisis at the downtown location," she said, looking flustered. "The manager locked himself out, and I need to help him fix it." I stared at her for a long moment. "Do you really need to leave for that? Can't he call security or something?" She hesitated, then said, "Yeah, you're right. I'll handle it over the phone." She turned around and went back into the bedroom, shutting the door behind her. I could hear her whispering for a few more minutes before everything went silent. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever was on the other end of that call wasn't a manager with a lock problem. Later that day, I decided to look into her downtown location crisis. A quick Google search showed nothing unusual, no complaints, no incidents, nothing to back up her story. That was the moment I knew I had to start digging for real. But I didn't get far before another curveball hit me straight in the face. Before I decided to swing by Emily's office for lunch, I'd been trying to dig into that anonymous email. My first instinct was to figure out who sent it. I scoured my inbox for any previous messages from the same address, nothing. Then I started Googling phrases from the email, trying to see if it matched any whistleblowing forums or posts. Again, nothing. But then came the curveball. The anonymous sender struck again, this time with a second email. The subject line? Still watching. This email was more detailed, and it made my stomach churn. It read, "Your wife's meeting with, name redacted, is more than just work. He's known for leveraging promotions in exchange for favors. Check her accounts. You'll find it." Attached were screenshots of what looked like wire transfers. 2 payments from Emily's account to what I assumed was his. They weren't massive amounts but big enough to raise questions. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. If this email was real, Emily might have been part of something unethical, or worse, illegal. This is where things get real. After Emily went to bed, I crept into the home office and powered up her laptop. My hands were shaking, but I kept telling myself I was only doing this to clear my head. If there was nothing to the email, I'd stop this nonsense and apologize to her for doubting her. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't find nothing. First, I checked her email. Nothing stood out. No correspondence with the mystery guy, no receipts, no flagged accounts. She's always been careful, so that didn't surprise me. Then I moved on to her bank accounts. She uses a password manager, which was both a blessing and a curse. I couldn't get in without guessing her master password. I sat there staring at the screen, trying combinations in my head. Then I remembered something. A few years back, she joked about always using the name of her childhood dog and a date for passwords. It took me 3 tries, but I got in. Her recent transactions didn't raise any red flags, just grocery store runs, work lunches, and the usual stuff. But when I checked her account history, I froze. There they were, 2 transfers, exactly matching the screenshots in the email. Both labeled consultation fee. My stomach turned. It didn't make sense. Emily didn't need to consult anyone. She's brilliant when it comes to her work. If anything, she's the one people go to for advice. So why was she paying this guy? I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to myself for safekeeping. Just as I was about to log out, I noticed something else. Her personal folder on the desktop. I know what you're thinking. Snooping through someone's personal files is a breach of trust. But trust was already on life support in our marriage, so I opened it. Most of it was harmless, pictures, old resumes, PDFs of recipes. But buried at the bottom was a file titled Draft Letter _ Confession. I clicked it open, and my heart started racing as I read. To my husband, I've made some terrible decisions lately, and I'm not sure how to explain them. I never intended for it to go this far, but I felt trapped. The expectations at work, the pressure to succeed, it got to me. I thought I was doing what was best for us, but I see now that I was wrong. I'm sorry if I've hurt you. I hope someday you can forgive me. It cut off abruptly, like she never finished writing it. My mind was spinning. What was she trying to confess? The payments? The late nights? The mystery guy? I barely slept that night. The next morning, I tried to act normal, but Emily kept giving me these sidelong glances, like she knew I was holding something back. I needed answers, but I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I had to figure out who sent those emails, and who the guy in the suit really was. That's what was on my mind when I decided to show up at her office unannounced for lunch. And that's why seeing her with the same guy from the first email, sitting at that corner booth, sent me spiraling. After they left, I sat at the bar, replaying the email and the lunch scene over and over in my mind. Were the payments real? Was this guy blackmailing her? Or was this some twisted scheme Emily was willingly involved in? When she got home that evening, I tried to act normal. I casually asked how her day was, and when she lied about barely having time for lunch, it took everything in me not to confront her right then and there. Instead, I waited until she was asleep and grabbed her laptop from the home office. If there was any truth to those screenshots, I was going to find it. I've been dancing around the real issue here. Deep down, it's not just about emails, bank transfers, or mysterious meetings. It's about my wife, Emily, the woman I've loved for over a decade, and whether she's been lying to me. The morning after finding the draft letter, I couldn't look at her the same way. Every word, every smile felt rehearsed. I kept wondering if she knew I'd been on her laptop, or if she suspected I was starting to put the pieces together. Over breakfast, she was scrolling on her phone like usual, and I casually asked, "Hey, how's everything going with the new job? Adjusting okay?" She nodded, not looking up. "Yeah, it's a lot, but I'm handling it." "Why do you ask?" I shrugged. "Just making sure you're not overworking yourself. You've been so busy lately." That's when she froze, just for a second. It was the tiniest pause, but I caught it. Then she smiled. "I appreciate you worrying, but I'm fine." "Really?" I wanted to believe her. I wanted to brush it all off, to tell myself I was overthinking things. But I couldn't. That evening, she came home later than usual, carrying a bottle of wine. "Thought we could celebrate," she said, setting it on the counter. "Celebrate what?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "My team hit a big milestone today," she said. "It's just nice to see everything coming together after all the hard work." Her words were perfectly reasonable, but something about her tone felt performative. Like she was trying too hard to sell it. We had dinner, drank the wine, and talked about nothing in particular. For a brief moment, things felt normal again. But later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, she said something that stopped me cold. "You know I love you, right?" she asked, her voice quiet. I turned to look at her, toothbrush still in hand. "Of course I do. Why would you even ask that?" She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know. You've just seemed distant lately. I want to make sure we're okay." The irony hit me like a freight train. Me? Distant? After everything I'd seen, everything I was wrestling with inside? I wanted to shout, to demand she tell me the truth. But instead I just nodded. "We're fine." She smiled and kissed me on the cheek before climbing into bed. But we weren't fine. And I had a feeling she knew it too. A couple of nights after Emily's milestone celebration, she told me we were invited to a dinner party hosted by her new regional director. She framed it as a casual work gathering, but the way she talked about it felt rehearsed. "Everyone's bringing their partners," she said, smiling. "It'll be good for you to meet my team." At first, I wasn't sure I wanted to go. I wasn't exactly in the mood to play the doting husband while secretly wondering if she was lying about everything. But then I realized this might be my chance to see things firsthand. If something was going on, maybe I'd catch a clue. The night of the party, Emily looked stunning, sleek black dress, makeup perfect, the whole 9 yards. "You clean up well," she teased as we got into the car, but I could tell she was nervous. Her usual playful banter was absent. The dinner was at her director's sprawling home, a modern, glass-walled mansion that screamed money. Inside, I was immediately struck by how polished everyone seemed. Suits, cocktail dresses, designer everything. It was like stepping into a magazine spread. Emily introduced me to her coworkers, all smiles and charm. For the first hour, everything seemed normal, until I saw him. The guy from the photo and the lunch meeting. He was here, laughing with a small group near the bar. "Who's that?" I asked Emily, trying to sound casual. "Oh, that's Damien," she said, her tone breezy. "He's one of the higher-ups. Kind of a mentor to me." Her voice didn't waver, but her hand tightened slightly on her wine glass. Damien noticed us and walked over, his smile wide and easy. "Emily," he said, pulling her into a quick hug before turning to me. "And you must be her husband. Great to finally meet you." The handshake was firm, his grin disarming. But there was something about the way he looked at Emily, like they shared a secret. As the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that Damien was more than just a mentor. He was attentive to Emily, always finding reasons to linger near her. At one point, I caught them in a quiet corner, their heads close together as they talked. When Emily saw me watching, she quickly stepped away and made her way back to me, laughing nervously. "What were you two talking about?" I asked as casually as I could. "Just work stuff," she said quickly. "He was giving me advice on handling my new responsibilities." I nodded, but my gut told me there was more to the story. The rest of the night passed in a blur of polite conversation and forced smiles. On the drive home, Emily was unusually quiet. When I asked if everything was okay, she just said she was tired. But something about the way she avoided my eyes told me there was more she wasn't saying. I couldn't get Damien out of my head, his familiarity with Emily, the way he looked at her, and the way she seemed different around him. Part of me wanted to brush it off as professional camaraderie, but another part of me felt like I was watching the edges of my marriage crumble in real time. The next day, Emily was quieter than usual. She left for work early, claiming she had back-to-back meetings. I spent most of the day replaying the dinner party in my mind, trying to piece together what I'd seen and felt. Then, around lunchtime, my phone buzzed with another email. It was from the same anonymous sender. "She's meeting him today. Check the Palomar Hotel." My stomach twisted. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating. I debated whether to go. Part of me thought it was a setup, some cruel joke, or my own paranoia running wild. But I couldn't ignore it. If there was even a sliver of truth to this, I needed to know. I got in my car and drove to the Palomar, my heart pounding the whole way. I parked a block away and walked to the lobby, trying to look like I belonged there. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Business people bustled around, chatting and sipping coffee. I started to think I'd made a mistake, that I'd let the email get into my head. And then I saw them. Emily and Damien were seated in a corner of the lounge, their heads close together. She was smiling, but it wasn't the carefree smile I used to know. It was nervous, restrained. Damien leaned in, saying something I couldn't hear, and Emily nodded. I couldn't bring myself to walk over. Instead, I sat in a chair near the back, watching them like a stranger observing a scene in a movie. It wasn't just the way they were talking, it was their body language. The way Damien reached out to touch her hand, the way she didn't pull away. My heart felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. After about 30 minutes, they stood up. Damien placed his hand on the small of her back as they walked toward the elevators. I froze. I wanted to follow, to demand answers, to confront her right then and there. But my feet felt glued to the floor. I didn't want to cause a scene, and deep down, I didn't want to know what would happen next. Instead, I left. I got in my car, drove to an empty parking lot, and sat there in silence. The reality of what I'd just seen was impossible to ignore. When Emily came home that evening, she acted like nothing had happened. "How was your day?" she asked, her tone light and breezy. "Fine," I replied, forcing a smile. But inside, I was breaking. I'd been sitting on this for a couple of days, trying to make sense of everything. That dinner party? It confirmed what I'd been too scared to admit. Something is going on between Emily and Damien. After we got home that night, things felt strained. She went straight to bed without saying much, and I stayed up in the living room, replaying every interaction I'd witnessed at the party. The way Damien hovered around her, the private conversations, the quick looks they exchanged, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. The next day, Emily seemed back to her usual self, cheerful, chatty, acting like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. That evening, as she was getting ready for another late meeting, I decided to test the waters. "You and Damien seem close," I said casually, leaning against the bathroom door as she applied her lipstick. Her hand froze for a fraction of a second before she forced a laugh. "He's my boss. Of course, we talk a lot." "Yeah, but it seemed like more than that at the party," I pressed. "You two had a lot of one-on-one time." She turned to face me, her expression carefully neutral. "Are you seriously jealous? Damien's been helping me navigate my new role, that's all. He's a great mentor." "Just a mentor?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Her eyes narrowed. "Yes, just a mentor. What's with the interrogation?" I backed off, not wanting to push her too hard. "Forget it. I was just curious." But she didn't forget it. That night, she was colder than usual, short answers, no small talk, and she went straight to bed without even saying goodnight. The following morning, I noticed she'd left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I couldn't resist checking her messages, and what I found only made things worse. There were several emails between her and Damien, nothing explicitly romantic, but the tone was way too familiar for a boss and employee. Lots of inside jokes, late-night exchanges, and one line from Damien that stuck out. "Looking forward to our next one-on-one. Last time was unforgettable." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. She came back into the kitchen as I was closing the laptop. "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone light but wary. "Just checking the news," I lied, hoping my face didn't betray me. She didn't press further, but her eyes lingered on me for a moment before she grabbed her coffee and left for work. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Every part of me wants to confront her, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more to uncover. I thought I was bracing myself for anything, but what happened next blindsided me completely. You'll never guess where this is heading. A few nights after the laptop incident, Emily came home earlier than usual, her face pale and her energy off. She didn't even bother with the usual small talk. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine, downed it in one go, and then turned to me, visibly shaking. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. This was it. She was going to admit the affair. All the lies, all the sneaking around, it was about to come to light. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on?" She took a deep breath, tears welling up in her eyes. "I've been hiding something from you," she said. "But it's not what you think." Her words threw me off. "What do you mean?" Emily's tears spilled over as she sat down at the kitchen table. "Damien has been blackmailing me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That wasn't what I expected. At all. "Blackmailing you?" I repeated, stunned. She nodded, clutching her wine glass like it was a lifeline. "It started a few months ago. After one of our networking events, he cornered me in the parking lot. He said he had dirt on some of my past mistakes, stuff I never told anyone about, and he'd ruin my career if I didn't cooperate." My mind was reeling. "Cooperate how?" I asked, leaning forward, my voice sharp. She hesitated before continuing. "At first, it was just favors, covering for him at work, helping him with personal errands. But then he started asking for more. He told me if I wanted the promotion, I'd have to play by his rules." Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. I stared at her, the pieces clicking together in my mind. The late nights, the secretive behavior, the cryptic emails, it all fit. But this wasn't the story I thought I'd been piecing together. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice softer now. She looked up, her face streaked with tears. "I was scared. Scared of what he'd do, scared of what you'd think of me. I thought I could handle it on my own." "Handle what exactly?" I pressed. Her eyes flickered with shame. "He implied that if I didn't entertain him during certain meetings, he'd make my life hell. I never crossed that line, I swear, but I couldn't get out of the situation." "The money transfers?" "That was hush money to keep him off my back." My stomach churned. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but how could I trust anything she was saying after all this? "Emily," I said carefully, "why didn't you come to me sooner? We could have handled this together." She shook her head. "You don't understand the pressure. I worked so hard to get where I am. I couldn't let him destroy everything." For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel anger. I felt confusion, compassion, and a lot of skepticism too. I needed time to process this. Was she telling the truth? Or was this just a masterfully crafted excuse? After Emily's tearful confession, I was torn. Part of me wanted to believe her. I mean, if she was being blackmailed, that's a nightmare, right? But the other part of me, the one still haunted by all the lies and red flags, couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I told her I believed her. What else could I say in the moment? She looked so broken, so vulnerable. I reassured her that we'd figure it out together, and I suggested going to the police. No, she said quickly, almost panicked. It's too risky. Damien has connections. If I push back, he'll just find another way to come after me. It was a weak excuse, but I didn't push. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, even though my gut told me otherwise. The next day, Emily left for work like normal, but something in her demeanor felt different, less tense, almost smug. It nagged at me all day, so when I had a free afternoon, I decided to swing by her office again. I told myself it was just to support her, maybe surprise her with lunch, but let's be real, I was fishing. When I arrived, the receptionist told me Emily was in a meeting. I didn't think much of it until I spotted Damien's car in the lot. I parked and waited, feeling like a character in some bad soap opera. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, I saw them through the window of a corner conference room, just the two of them. I couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language was unmistakable. He leaned in close, talking animatedly, while she sat back with her arms crossed, looking annoyed. Then her expression softened, and she smiled, a real, genuine smile. I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped inside and moved down the hallway toward the conference room. As I got closer, I could hear bits and pieces of their conversation through the cracked door. He totally bought it. Emily was saying, her tone casual, almost amused. I played the whole tears and blackmail card, and he ate it up. My heart stopped. Damien chuckled. Told you it'd work. Guys like him always want to play the hero. So, what's the plan now? Same as before, she said. Keep him in the dark while we finalize everything. He won't see it coming. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Every word was like a dagger twisting deeper. I backed away quietly, my mind racing. So, the whole blackmail story was a lie, a carefully crafted performance to cover whatever game they were playing. I got back in my car and sat there for what felt like hours, staring blankly at the dashboard. I wanted to storm in, confront her, demand answers, but I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. Not yet. Now I know the truth, or at least part of it. Emily isn't the victim she made herself out to be. She's been playing me all along. I've reached my breaking point. After hearing Emily and Damien laughing about how I totally bought it, something inside me snapped. The anger wasn't just boiling anymore, it was laser-focused. If they thought I was some clueless, helpless husband, they were about to learn otherwise. That night, I didn't say a word to Emily about what I'd heard. She came home like everything was normal, asked me about my day, and even suggested we watch a movie together. It took everything in me to play along, but I knew I couldn't tip her off. Instead, I spent the next few days quietly gathering my own arsenal. If Damien was the puppet master behind this charade, his business would be the perfect place to hit him where it hurt. Here's the thing, Damien isn't just Emily's boss, he owns a chain of upscale restaurants, and his reputation as a savvy businessman is what keeps him at the top. But the more I dug, the more cracks I found in his empire. I reached out to a friend from college, Ryan, who works in corporate investigations. I gave him a very vague rundown, just that I suspected Damien of unethical practices and wanted to know if there was dirt on him. Ryan didn't ask too many questions, but within 48 hours, he came back with a goldmine. Apparently, Damien's success wasn't as clean as it looked. He'd been using underhanded tactics for years, pocketing funds from fake invoices, exploiting employees, and even dodging taxes through shell companies. There were rumors about hush money payouts to keep disgruntled employees quiet. Now I had a choice: go straight to the authorities or use this information to dismantle his little empire myself. I chose the latter. First, I anonymously tipped off a local journalist who'd been investigating corruption in the restaurant industry. I provided just enough details to get them digging into Damien's finances. Next, I sent a similar anonymous tip to a labor rights organization, highlighting his shady practices with employees. But the cherry on top? I compiled everything I had on Damien, including his texts with Emily, the financial documents from their consultations, and the recordings of their conversations. I sent it all to his major investors, framing it as a warning about their CEO's misconduct. The fallout was swift. Within days, whispers about Damien's shady dealings started circulating. Investors pulled out, lawsuits were threatened, and employees began coming forward with their own stories of exploitation. Emily noticed my newfound energy during all of this. "You seem different lately," she said one evening, eyeing me curiously. I just smiled. "Work's been busy." She had no idea that her golden ticket, Damien, was on the verge of losing everything. "It's all coming down now. Everything I set in motion has snowballed into the ultimate reckoning, and honestly, I don't feel bad about it. Not even a little." The journalist I tipped off published a scathing exposé about Damien's shady business practices. They didn't name their source, obviously, but they laid out everything: his fake invoices, tax dodges, employee exploitation, and a little nugget about hush money payments that made his whole operation stink of corruption. Within hours, it was all over the news. Investors were scrambling, pulling out faster than rats fleeing a sinking ship. A couple of disgruntled former employees filed lawsuits, citing mistreatment and unpaid wages. And the labor rights organization? They launched a public campaign against him, which absolutely destroyed the reputation of his restaurants. Emily came home that night in a panic. "Did you see the news?" she asked, pacing the living room. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "Rough day for Damien, huh?" She shot me a look, like she was trying to gauge how much I knew. "It's bad," she muttered. "He's trying to keep everything under control, but people are pulling out left and right. It's like a witch hunt." Oh, Emily, if only you knew who was holding the torch. Over the next week, things got even worse. The investors I tipped off had done more digging, uncovering not only Damien's financial misdeeds but also his inappropriate relationships with employees. And yes, Emily's name came up. While they couldn't prove anything salacious, the connection between her promotion and Damien's downfall was enough to raise eyebrows. She started coming home late again, but this time, it wasn't for secret meetings, it was to clean up the mess Damien had left behind. Then came the final blow. I sent an anonymous tip to the board of directors at Damien's company, attaching every piece of evidence I had on him and Emily. Texts, financial transfers, recordings, the mentorship he'd been offering her. Everything. It wasn't long before the board held an emergency meeting and voted to fire Damien as CEO. The cherry on top? They're now investigating Emily's role in the whole mess. The night it all fell apart, Emily came home looking like she'd been hit by a truck. She dropped her purse on the counter and slumped into a chair. "It's over," she whispered, her voice hollow. I leaned against the counter, keeping my tone calm. "What's over?" "Damien's out. The board fired him today. And now they're looking into me, like I'm some kind of accomplice." She looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. I could lose everything. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered all the lies, the manipulation, the laughter I overheard as she gloated to Damien about fooling me. Any pity I might have had evaporated. "You'll figure it out," I said flatly. Her head snapped up, and for the first time, she seemed to really look at me. "You don't seem surprised," she said slowly. "Why aren't you more upset about this?" I smiled, the kind of smile that says, "You don't even know what's coming." "Maybe I'm just tired of surprises," I said. "Good luck, Emily." And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving her to stew in the wreckage of the life she tried to build at my expense. I've been holding my breath for weeks, waiting for the dust to settle, and now that it has, I feel free. Let me tell you how it ended. After Damien's firing and the board's investigation into Emily, her entire world crumbled. She was called into a disciplinary meeting where she was asked to explain the financial transactions, the texts, and her role in Damien's schemes. From what I've pieced together, she tried to play the victim, claiming she was manipulated and coerced into everything. It didn't work. Her reputation was in shambles. Word spread quickly within the company, and no one wanted to work with her anymore. The board terminated her employment. For cause. Which meant no severance, no references, no lifeline to salvage her career. Emily came home that night looking utterly defeated. I was sitting in the living room, waiting. I lost everything, she said, collapsing onto the couch. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't even know where to start. I stayed silent for a long moment, just watching her. Then I said, I think you should start by packing your things. Her head shot up, eyes wide. What? You heard me, I said, my voice calm but firm. I've been patient, Emily. I've given you chance after chance to come clean, to be honest with me. Instead, you lied, manipulated, and betrayed me. Whatever mess you're in now? That's your problem, not mine. But I didn't. She started, tears already streaming down her face. Don't, I cut her off. Don't insult me with more lies. I heard you, Emily. I heard you and Damien laughing about how you fooled me. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. I deserve better, I said, standing up and heading for the door. And so do you, frankly. Maybe this is your chance to figure out who you are without stepping on other people to get there. I left her sitting there, stunned and crying, while I walked outside to clear my head. The next morning, I handed her a stack of paperwork, separation agreements, custody plans. We didn't have kids, but I included pet custody just to be safe, and instructions for moving out. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I said. This is the cleanest way to end things. Please don't make it messy. She tried to argue, to plead for another chance, but I didn't budge. By the end of the week, she was gone. As for Damien? He's done. The lawsuits, the bad press, the financial investigations, he'll be lucky if he's not behind bars in a year. His restaurants are being sold off piece by piece, and his name is poison in the industry. And me? I'm moving forward. I sold the house Emily and I shared, started therapy, and reconnected with friends I drifted away from during this mess. It's not easy, but every day feels a little lighter. If I've learned anything from this, it's to trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And sometimes, the hardest thing you can do is let go of someone you love.